Hey everyone, this is Justin from LitTube, and I'm once again back with Mr. Phil Hoyle, our resident historian and just general know-it-all.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
Now, you're just getting off of work, and I believe you're exhausted at the moment, are you not? Tell me about what
I
you're
am. Yeah. What did you say? Yeah, the fatigue is setting in. What did you say?
I was just asking how you're feeling. I know you worked a long shift.
I feel pretty positive and pretty good right now.
Good.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this video, because I wanted to we did a video before kind of introducing you to the channel, and we went off on a big long tangent about the outlook of the U.S. economy and the current pandemic and that sort of thing. But I want to drill in a little more specific on this video because you referenced in the last video a point about how you thought that, well, you were certain that the housing market was going to crash. My question is, what makes you so certain of that? Like, what specifically are you looking at? I mean, I know you referenced, Google it or go and ask Jeeves, but really, what are we going to find when we do that?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with this. I found this a few days ago, this article. And it's from April. And the article said, I'd have to pull it up here, but it basically said, with a recession looming, should I sell my house now? And I said that was from April 2019, not April 2020.
Okay.
So there have already been like financial persons concerned about the stability of the housing market, which inevitably takes us back to 2007, 2008, 2009, where to me, quite simply, without getting into the I don't think one even needs to know the details of what happened 10 years ago. All you need to know is that the United States government and the people just borrowed our way out of the crisis. That's all we did. We talked about the deficit and the debt last week. That's all you need to know. If you just see that how the debt for the federal government went up and how people's I don't know. Again, I'd have to go find all do all the math and find all the figures. I know it's there. We will get to it eventually, but we all just borrowed our way out of the problem from 10 years ago to today. So why wouldn't it happen again? That's the simplest way I think about it.
Well, I think it's important to get into the context, though, of why the 2008 crash in the housing market and ultimately the stock market, too, as a result, happened, because I happen to know quite a bit on the subject. And, the stage was set in the late 1990s with this, because that was when Fannie Mae was changing the guidelines for basically they're trying to make it more accessible for people to borrow that wanted a
exactly.
And so as a result, you had more loans going to people with lower credit scores, people that didn't have the savings to be able to pay back the loans that were taken out. And then really what it lit the whole thing on fire in 2008 is that you started to see banks and investment firms pushing out these mortgage-backed securities into the secondary markets where other investors were basically gambling on them. Thinking they were investment grade, because at the time the conventional wisdom was, well, anything that's a AAA or AA rated mortgage-backed security, that's the American housing market. I mean, that's as solid as it gets, is what everyone was thinking.
Yeah.
But really, you had the agencies, the rating agencies on Wall Street, like the Moody's, the S&P, and all that. They were kind of like bribed into giving good ratings to these mortgage-backed securities when they were
recall reading about that.
Poor quality. So. And a lot of investment firms and banks and individual investors all got burned by all this, because you had a lot of even the investment firms had a lot of their assets in this, and so you had Lehman Brothers go under. Yeah. They went bankrupt. You had Bear Stearns, AIG, some other investment firms. They had to get bailed out. You saw the property values, the real estate values go down across the board. So it was just really bad for all parties involved, not just Wall Street, but the individual investors, people with retirement accounts.
Main Street, we call them.
But and there were some that profited off this, because I don't know, to our audience, if you've ever watched the movie The Big Short, I recommend that one, because it focuses on the couple guys that really profited off this whole thing. One of them being Dr. Michael Burry. And what he did, which is kind of funny to me, at the time, there was really not a way to bet against these, like, the housing market and these mortgage-backed securities. So he had to go to an investment firm, I believe it was Goldman Sachs, or like one of the other big investment firms that he went to, and he had them make a credit swap for him to, like, bet against this whole thing. So it was, like, previously, like, unheard of, but he went to one of these investment firms, had them create that for him, and then he, like, put his money on that. Ultimately, he ended up being, like, really early in his calculation, so he's losing money on his short position for a bit, but then eventually, like, things started turning his favor. That's the thing that happens when you short the market. You have to pay, like, if there's dividends or something like that, you have to pay it while have your short position open.
Okay.
It's really risky to short anything.
Yeah, I don't know how all that stuff works.
Because even if you're ultimately right, if you, like, made that bet too soon, you could still get screwed in the end. So, like, that's why, I don't mess around with that stuff, even if I'm pretty sure something's going to happen, because it's harder to know when, it's harder to know when. But really, that's the context of the whole, like, 2008 crash. And I mean, I don't know, do you see something like that happening again? Because I feel like we would have learned our lesson from that.
Oh, it's already happening. There's no, I forget if it was you or someone told me about how we're gonna go into commercial property, but about how they how do I say this, like, here right now in private property, or like houses and stuff, like we're not allowed to get kicked out if we don't pay our mortgages, we don't pay our rents, we're not allowed to foreclose. But that's not applying for businesses. So who knows how many businesses across the United States and across the world are not being able to pay the rent on their leases. WeWork, excuse me. Not being able to pay the rent for their leases on their property. I mean, I say, like, like restaurants or any type of retail stuff. Yeah, they're not, I mean, they're not doing business, or not doing as much business, so they're not able to pay the rent to whoever owns the commercial property. And that, again, I have to do more research, and hopefully I will tomorrow.
But does that seem more like a short-term issue because of the pandemic? I mean, like, once the pandemic clears up, whenever that's going to be, you figure everything could return to where the business as usual, right?
No, there's two reasons for that. The first reason is that if I'm trying to think of the term for this, but if you have if you're renting, here's a kind of hypothetical example, I guess. If you own commercial property that you rent out, actually, I can try to think about WeWork in a specific way. So WeWork, I can actually give WeWork's a good example. I love picking on WeWork because I watched a documentary about them. I don't know if you know what WeWork does. You know about WeWork? Yeah, I heard about. You've ever heard of them?
It sounds familiar, but no, I don't know what that is.
So WeWork. Basically, what this guy did, his name is Adam Newman. He, with his business with WeWork, would rent out a space in a commercial property, and then he would sublet pieces of it to however many persons or organizations the WeWork business could at a time. So, and this is relevant because I sent you the text actually about SoftBank. So what he did was he got however much money from SoftBank, right? He borrowed from SoftBank and started to rent out properties. And then so I'm so tired. he would lease, he would lease the property. He would sign the lease on the property. And then he would sublet to different persons and organizations on that property. So it would be as if the house I'm in now, it would be as if I were to rent the whole house for $1,500 and then sublet each room. There's 5 rooms in this house for $500. So I would pay $1,500 to the property owner and then receive $2,500 from the 5 different tenants. On top of that, the issue would be if I were to have borrowed money to do that. That's the problem. So if I were to borrow, let's say, I said $1,500. So if I were to do that for 10-month period, right, that would be $15,000. So I would borrow whatever the amount of money it was to rent this whole house. And then I would take $500 from each person over the time period of 10 months. But if each person or half the persons in the house or the property, whatever, lose their jobs, they can't pay me the money they owe me. And then I can't pay whomever I borrowed from for me. It's so complicated. You have to draw a diagram. I wouldn't be able to pay the bank back. I paid $15,000 flat that I borrowed from the bank, and I'm supposed to pay the bank back, but I'm not getting rent from my tenants, so I can't pay the bank. And you multiply that over so many other people, and then the bank eventually goes under.
But so you're saying this sort of thing is happening in the commercial market now?
Oh, this already happened with WeWork. Yeah, WeWork. This happened. There's great stuff if anyone wants to go out and, like, I forget which video it was. This already happened. This happened months ago. Yeah, this happened months ago where they kind of, I don't say they ran out of, it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme in a way. Like they ran out of properties to rent in a way. I'd have to watch again or read about it. And then the guy was just a terrible manager anyway. It's kind of funny. I mean, sad but funny because thousands of persons have been laid off, and this was months ago. This is back in like August or September.
Well, so Phil, I mean, the thing is, I have some investments that have to do with like commercial real estate. Like I'm invested in some REITs, like they own properties.
I forget what that stands for.
Real estate investment trust. So it's like,
okay.
It's basically like, think of it this way, like a company that owns land or property, whatever you want to call it, and they rent it out to their tenants being like businesses. So for an example, you could have like an industrial REIT. They buy up industrial properties, and then the company, maybe it's Amazon that was using it for their shipping storage.
Okay, good. You're making my point for me. You're exactly making my point for me. Exactly. So you in this case are the lender to a business who is using your money to lease a property, take out a lease on a property, and then sublet it to others. So,
well, I don't know that that's happening in the example I referenced.
That's exactly what's happening. What you just mentioned, I think, on a REIT. I mean, what else could it be? I mean, you're saying that.
Well, it's think of it this way. It's like, take for example, I'll use it as an example, and I don't know all of their tenants off the top of my head, but like there's a REIT called Monmouth Realty. They're an industrial REIT, so
Yeah.
they deal with like industrial related businesses. So for example, one of their major tenants is Amazon. So
Okay.
Amazon needs storage space for all their products
Yeah.
that are shipped out, and maybe the warehouse actually owned by Monmouth.
Exactly.
But Amazon, instead of owning the warehouse, is just paying to have
Exactly. Oh yeah, Amazon's screwed. I know their stock has been going up. Amazon's screwed. 100% screwed. It's not going to be for, I don't know how long it's going to be. Amazon's screwed. Oh yeah. Jeff Bezos is going to lose billions of dollars.
Well, now hold on a second.
Billions.
I need to understand your rationale behind that, because a lot of people are viewing Amazon as this high growth company. Now, sure, they don't have a ton of cash on the balance sheet or that they're paying out in dividends, but that's because they're reinvesting a lot into the business and their continued growth. I mean, what makes you think Amazon's going to crash?
That's what I said last week. I quoted George Washington. No money. Who's going to buy stuff from Amazon besides me at this point? I mean, there's lots of people still working, I guess, but yeah, who's gonna buy stuff? That's the issue. Who's gonna buy from Amazon?
Well, so now you're kind of forecasting a world where like nobody's going to be buying anything.
Exactly. Absolutely. Anyone can go read the headlines. They're talking about Great Depression, liquidity crisis, deflation. I mean,
so it sounds like your thesis really for behind the housing market crash is just that everything else is going to crash too, anyways.
I mean, that's not untrue. But how do I say it's not that the housing crisis is going to hit, I guess I'll say, commercial property crisis. That's how I thought it was going to be. That's how I thought this was going to happen. It would start from the housing crisis. But what it really is the shutdown and the whatever social distancing and whatever they call it, is hitting everything all at once. And to me, I've told you, I mean, my big thing is oil. If there's anything that's going to go first in the United States, but it's across the world, it's going to be anything that has to do with oil production. That's the first thing it's going to go under. But back to the housing crisis. No, it's all these things happening at once. It's not that housing. I mean, it's one domino knocking down like 4 at a time. Yeah, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds to me like you should be shorting ExxonMobil with the.
You should be shorting. If you know how to do that stuff, you should short everything. Yeah. Yeah. As
well, hold on though, because in order to be a successful short, you have to know a general time frame of this stuff. So, like, I mean, when are you predicting these kind of collapses, like in oil and housing and all that?
Okay, we'll go with oil because that's kind of what I've looked at the most. That has to do. I don't know how much you want me to go into this. Because I've been following oil prices very heavily the past 3 weeks. And what's been going on with oil prices is that people in the world are reacting to news events instead of reacting to the number one issue, which has to do with math. And I don't know what the math is. I think I could find out if I needed to, but you want to talk about, being smart enough or knowing enough to short. What's going on right now with oil production is that everyone is filling up their storage capacity. That's the issue. So companies are still being able to produce oil. So they're operating under the hope that some miracle is going to happen and the oil, I don't know, the shutdown will end or whatever, and the oil market will bounce back or whatever. But the issue is storage capacity. That's the issue. There's only a finite amount of space left that the United States companies and the Saudi companies and the Russian companies, because those are the three big players right now, there's only a finite amount of space where those three countries, the businesses in those three countries, can store their oil. So it's been going, the only thing that's keeping oil up right now, the only thing keeping oil up is the talk of the world leaders that they're going to cut production down. That's the only thing that's kept, in my opinion, that has kept oil from hitting $10 a barrel. Either the WTI, which is the West Texas Intermediate, or the Brent crude. West Texas is the U.S. benchmark, more or less, and Brent, I think, is like the British or the Arabian Peninsula benchmark. I haven't finished like researching all that stuff yet. But yeah, the Dow is the same thing. The stuff going on in the Dow Jones right now is the exact same thing. The investors are operating under, oh, they're doing the stimulus package. Oh, they're thinking the virus isn't going to be as bad. Oh, they're lending all this money out. Stuff like that. That's what's propping all these prices up right now. Are the political leaders just shooting their gums, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I did invest in a hospital REIT earlier this afternoon.
Yeah.
I figure hospitals are going to be getting business at a time like this.
Yeah, to me it's unclear what is going to, and I am going to use the word. I mean, the word is survive. To me, it's unclear what businesses are going to survive, because the bankruptcies in the oil companies in the U.S. I mean, we're already on number 3. There was one that filed for bankruptcy months ago before this crisis hit. Yeah.
Well, so it sounds to me like you're pretty confident that there's going to be an oil crash followed by a housing market crash. But
the oil crash has already started.
Right, but we haven't seen these businesses go out of business yet. I mean, ExxonMobil is still operating, Shell is still operating, Chevron, they're all still operating, are they not?
I mean, in my opinion, that's because they, like you mentioned, Amazon. It's because they have cash on hand. It's the same exact principle where whoever millions of persons in the United States are renting right now, who were discerning enough to have savings. That's why this is a problem for people who saved up. If you've got one person who saved up for 6 months of rent and another person who saved up for no months of rent, should the person who saved up 6 months pay their rent? But that's what's going on with these oil companies and all these other businesses in the United States. They actually still have cash on hand, but the cash is running out, and the cash just hasn't completely run out yet. That's why the main crashes have not occurred yet.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you understand.
I think we should move on to the next thing I want to ask you about, though, and this is a headline that came across, I want to say within the past year this happened. There is now a bank in Denmark, called Jysk Bank, that is offering a negative interest rate on their mortgage loans to people in Denmark, so they can buy houses. It's a negative 0.5% interest rate, essentially meaning that you get a loan and you're not actually paying any interest for the loan. In fact, it's at favorable terms to you, where you're going to be paying less. Except
you are paying, and this is why. It's because of deflation. That's the issue. It's like it's like you're not technically paying interest, but it's like when people talk, the opposite would be talking about inflation, right? If the U.S. gives treasuries at 1%, whatever, it doesn't matter what the time period is, 1% a year, and inflation is 2% a year, you are actually losing money on your investment. So the flip side is true, in that, I guess I shouldn't say, it's more complicated when you look at deflation.
So I guess what you're saying is, in a deflationary environment, that would mean that the money, the cash or whatever money this country has is going up in value over time, right?
Yes, yes,
And
the cash value would go up.
so even if you have a negative interest rate on your mortgage, in reality, that negative 0.5%, you could have the money, the money. I don't know what they use in Denmark for their money.
I think they're part of the EU.
I don't know the currency they use, but
Yeah,
we could say the euro then.
yeah. I'm pretty sure they're in the EU. They
So
use
the euro could be going up in value 3% a year, while meanwhile
you're looking at the wrong issue. It's not what the euro is valued at. It's what the property is valued at. Because if you do a negative 1% interest rate for a mortgage, but the property value declines 3% every year, you are in effect paying interest on your loan, on your mortgage. Because if you buy a property for $100,000 and it's worth, 10 years later it's worth $80,000, you just lost $20,000. That's the issue. That's what deflation does. Yeah. So they're doing that to try and keep the market going, to prop it up as long as possible. Yeah, you're still paying the interest. You're just doing it in a different way.
Yeah, that's interesting, but I think ultimately, as if I was looking to buy a home, I mean, I guess the safest thing to do is, I mean, in reality, most people aren't in this situation, but if you could just pay it for it all up front with cash and not have to deal with any mortgages, that's probably your best bet.
Well, what I would say is no one should buy a property right now. No one should buy property because it hasn't bottomed out yet. Yeah.
And you know when the bottom is.
I'm gonna find out. We'll see. It's gonna be very, very, very interesting. I looked up for 2008. Property values declined by a third. I forget. I think the bottom was after the stock market started recovering. The bottom of the stock market was March 2009. I think the bottom of the housing was a year later. I'm not sure. I have to look it up again. Yeah.
Do you see yourself owning property at any point in time? Like, is that something that you want to do?
Do I?
Yeah.
I do. I will not take out a mortgage. I do believe, I suspect, and this is going to sound really, really, really out in left field, I think we could see 80% reduction in property value where I live. I think a $100,000, well, we'll go with $1 million since things are more like that. I would say you will have $1 million properties falling to $200,000 value in the next, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years. That's just my guess. It will happen unless we hit hyperinflation first. It all depends on what point the central bank decides to start the hyperinflation. Yeah, in which case we'll be buying stuff in not cash. Yeah, I won't be, at least.
Let's end on one last question, shall we?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try wording this a little different, because I think I asked you a similar question last video, but I want to word this a little different in the context of this whole housing and oil crash we've been discussing in this video. So I guess what I want to know is, if you're someone that does own property or think you own property and have a mortgage out, what does someone like that do? Someone like in that situation, what would they do what would be their best move in your view in terms of like trying to protect themselves?
Exactly, and that's interesting. I mean, that's a really good question. And I have been thinking about it. I would say the first thing you could try to do now, the second thing you will be able to do later. One thing I think I'm really good at is knowing when to cut my losses. And I would tell anybody with a mortgage, with a substantial mortgage left, sell your property as soon as possible. Do it as soon as possible and find somewhere else to live. If you got to take a loss in some way, take the loss. You have to do it ASAP. Unless you think somehow you can manage to finish the rest of the mortgage. But if not, if you got to take a loss, you got to take the loss. That's my opinion.
Well, but even in your situation, your scenario you've proposed within the next 3 to 5 years, you're guessing that this is all going to hit the fan. I mean, let's say someone paid off their mortgage. I mean, it would still behoove them to sell the property then, in your view, would it not?
No, you should. It depends. See, then you get into geography. If you own real estate right now, you have to decide. The main question right now is to decide where you want to live. If you own a property right now, it's all about where do you want to live. And if you feel, and this, I mean, it's what it comes down to, the war. I mean, the war on some level, and I don't mean pitched battles out on the street, but there is going to be war-like, we're already experiencing it, war-like tendencies going on right now. And you need to decide, a person needs to decide, do you want to live closer to the cities or further from the cities? That's the main question to ask yourself if you own your property outright without a mortgage.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the question of where do you want to live, because ultimately I think that's a big reason I haven't tried to buy property. I mean, not that I have like that much money to be doing that anyways, but I've always felt like the whole I've never been through the process, but it seems like when you buy or sell a house, it's like a very involved process and it doesn't go like that. It's a long process. So I don't even want to be involved with that unless I'm
It might speed up. It might speed up in the future. We'll see. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, if I'm going to buy a house, like, I want it to be somewhere where I'm like, this is where I'm trying to live the rest of my life, or at least like for the next 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't buy a property in Maryland because I don't know if I'm going to be here in like 2-3 years. I think I'm probably going to go somewhere else.
Well, that's where I don't think, the way I see the future, no one is going anywhere.
Really?
Unless you're homeless and you're a refugee looking for food. That's what we're going to come down to. I didn't watch the video, but I saw a thing on Vice where they said there were, I forget what city it was, but homeless who were like occupying abandoned houses because they wanted safety. Yeah.
Well, Phil, you're just, opening all different layers of this every time.
Exactly.
You're setting the stage for a new video every time.
Exactly. Because that is the issue. And I've told people this is, I forget where I saw in the video. But it's, there are multiple, you talk about layers. I would say factors. There are multiple factors to consider in every decision that needs to be made. Absolutely. There's multiple factors. And I think it's why I've been able to survive the way I have and why I'm doing so well right now is because I take all factors into account for all my, I take as many factors into account as I can for all the decisions I make. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're about to sign off here. Any last second advice that you would want to give? Again, property owners, people with mortgages, people thinking about buying property outside of sell what you got. I mean, do you have any other advice as far as what they should do with their assets in the meantime? Let's say they sold their property. What are they doing in the meantime?
I would say the two things I tell people, and this will get into another issue, is what I've been doing: network and study. Network with people and study, and if possible, find employment at an essential services business and take whatever they give you.
Do you recommend reading books to get information? Because I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there these days.
You said,
You said study, so I want to dig a
yeah.
little deeper into that.
I think, I mean, that's where you get into like my personal preferences, but I would say you want to develop an expertise on an issue or multiple issues, and it can even be something kind of bizarre, less mainstream. But if you got to find like you got to think of information as like an asset, like knowledge, like they say knowledge is power, the cliche. I mean, information and knowledge, and I like this is like a military term, intelligence. And I can say without a doubt that the intelligence, and again, I don't mean like being smart, I mean intelligence as in getting information. The intelligence that I've been gathering over the course of my life finally is starting to pay off for me in my personal relationships and in my work relationships, because I've diversified my intelligence tools so much that I can function in very stressful and nuanced environments that others can't cope with, is what I've been discovering.
Okay. Well, perhaps we can dig deeper
If
into
you
that.
want, yeah, that's a whole other issue. But yeah, study, network, and take the employment if you're willing to risk the risks, and you'll take whatever they give you, because the era of easy money is quickly drawing to a close, and it's going to only be the intelligent and the hardworking who are going to be able to survive. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to encourage our viewers to make sure to leave a comment, because Phil will be responding to comments, as will I. We want to really engage the community in these videos, and make sure to like and subscribe to LitTube channel, and stay tuned. Let us know what you'd like to see next if you have any preferences.